She saw her billionaire ex-husband's Find Your Family campaign, then her daughter's face suddenly appeared on the screen. Vienna Drake's entire world shattered in exactly 3 seconds. She was sitting in the waiting area of Miss Rebecca's dance studio on a rainy Tuesday evening in Portland, scrolling through work emails while waiting for her 5-year-old daughter Malia to finish ballet class. The television mounted on the wall had been playing quietly in the background, some news program Vienna wasn't paying attention to, until a familiar voice made her freeze mid-scroll. That voice. Deep, commanding, impossibly confident. A voice she'd spent 6 years trying to forget. Vienna's head snapped up, and there he was, Noah Bennett. Her ex, the man she'd once loved with every fiber of her being. The billionaire CEO she'd fled from when their relationship imploded in the most painful way possible. He stood at a podium during what looked like a major press conference, his dark hair now touched with grey at the temples, his jaw still sharp and defined, those storm-grey eyes still holding the intensity that had once made her believe in forever. He looked older, more weathered, but somehow even more commanding than she remembered. Today, Bennett Enterprises is launching the Find Your Family initiative, Noah announced, his voice filling the small waiting room. We're partnering with adoption agencies, foster care systems and DNA registries across the country to help families torn apart by circumstance find their way back to each other. Vienna's throat tightened. Her hands began to tremble around her phone. Every child deserves to know where they came from, Noah continued, his expression serious and determined. Every parent deserves the chance to be found. We've compiled a comprehensive database of children seeking biological relatives, and we're using every resource at Bennett Enterprises' disposal to make these connections happen. No. No. Vienna should have looked away, should have changed the channel, should have walked outside to escape the sound of his voice and the flood of memories threatening to drown her. But she sat frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe, watching the man she'd once planned a future with announce a program that felt designed to destroy the carefully constructed life she'd built. Before I continue, let me just say thank you. Seriously, thank you to every single person who helped us reach over 1,000 subscribers on Mr. Steele Rich Stories. You amazing. People are the reason we can keep bringing you these powerful stories about love, loss, and redemption. And if this story moves you, if it makes you feel something real, please, I'm begging you, hit that share button. Send this to someone who needs to hear it. Your shares help us grow this community and tell more stories that matter. Now, back to Vienna's nightmare. The screen changed. A montage began playing across the television, dozens of children's faces flickering past, each one part of the database Noah's initiative had created. Happy faces, serious faces, hopeful faces of kids searching for biological parents or relatives who might be looking for them. Vienna's pulse hammered in her ears. Her vision narrowed to that screen, to those faces cycling past in an endless stream of hope and longing. And then she saw her, Malia. Her daughter's face appeared on that screen for exactly 3 seconds, but it might as well have been 3 hours for the way time seemed to stop completely. Those bright hazel eyes, Noah's eyes, unmistakably his eyes, sparkled with the same mischief Vienna saw every morning at breakfast. Malia's dark curls framed her face in the photo, which must have been taken at school, somehow uploaded into some database by someone who thought they were helping a child find her missing father. The caption beneath Malia's photo made Vienna's blood run cold. Malia Drake, age 5, seeking biological father. The waiting room tilted sideways. Vienna gripped the edge of her plastic chair so hard her knuckles went white, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps that didn't seem to bring any oxygen to her lungs. The other mothers in the waiting room were chatting amongst themselves, completely unaware that Vienna's carefully constructed reality was collapsing like a house of cards. This couldn't be happening, after everything she'd done to keep them hidden, to keep Malia safe from the complications of the Bennett family dynasty and all its toxic expectations. Her daughter's face had just been broadcast on national television as part of Noah's campaign. Noah would see it. He had to have seen it already. He'd launched this campaign himself. He would review every face, every file, every detail. And when he did, he would do the math that Vienna had been running from for 6 years. Malia was 5 years old. Vienna had disappeared from New York 6 years ago, exactly 3 months after their explosive breakup. Those hazel eyes staring out from the television screen were a genetic stamp that couldn't be denied or explained away. He would know. If he didn't know already, he would know soon. Vienna's phone slipped from her trembling fingers and clattered against the linoleum floor. The sharp sound made a few mothers glance her way with mild concern, but Vienna barely registered their presence. Her mind raced through 1,000 calculations, 1,000 fears, 1,000 scenarios of what came next. 6 years. She'd had 6 years of peace. 6 years of building a quiet, simple life in Portland where nobody knew her history or asked questions about Malia's father. 6 years of working double shifts at the pediatric clinic, raising her daughter alone, carefully avoiding anything that reminded her of the life she'd left behind in New York. She didn't watch financial news. She didn't read society columns. She certainly didn't follow the movements of Bennett Enterprises or its enigmatic CEO. Vienna had become an expert at invisibility, at constructing a life so far removed from her past that it felt safe. But safety, she realized with growing horror, had always been an illusion. How did this happen? How had Malia's photo ended up in that database? Vienna had been so careful. She'd never registered Malia with any genetic testing services, never filled out forms that asked probing questions about absent parents, never signed anything that might create a trail back to Noah. It must have been the school, some well-meaning counselor who'd noticed that Malia's intake forms listed father unknown in the paternal information section and thought they were helping. Or maybe some new program that partnered with schools to identify children who might benefit from family reunification services. Vienna had probably signed something without reading the fine print, too exhausted from working double shifts to scrutinize every permission slip and administrative form. One mistake, one oversight, and now everything was about to explode. The studio door opened, releasing a burst of classical music and the sound of Miss Rebecca calling out corrections. Malia would be coming through those doors any second now, her face flushed and happy from an hour of dancing, chattering about pirouettes and the upcoming December recital, completely unaware that her entire life was about to change. Vienna forced herself to pick up her phone with shaking hands. She wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to grab Malia, throw their essentials in the car, and drive. Just drive, disappear again, create new identities, start over somewhere Noah would never find them. But she couldn't run this time. The damage was done. Malia's face was in a national database, probably already being reviewed by Noah's team, maybe already flagged as a potential match based on age and location. Running would only make things worse, make Vienna look like she had something to hide, which, of course, she did. She had everything to hide. Her daughter, the truth, 6 years of secrets. Vienna pressed her hand against her chest, trying to slow her racing heart. She'd made a choice 6 years ago, a choice she believed was right, was necessary, was the only way to protect Malia from the Bennett family's dysfunction and Noah's inability to stand up to his mother's manipulation. She'd chosen to raise her daughter in peace, rather than watch Noah feel trapped by obligation, or worse, watch him try to take Malia away because that's what people with money and power did when they wanted something. But now, sitting in this dance studio waiting room with rain pattering against the windows and Noah's face still burned into her vision, Vienna wondered if she'd actually protected anyone at all, or if she'd just delayed an inevitable confrontation that was now crashing toward her like a freight train with no brakes. The life she'd built, the quiet apartment in the Hawthorne district, the job at the clinic where her co-workers knew nothing about her past, the simple routines of school drop-offs and dance classes and bedtime stories, all of it was about to explode into a million pieces. Because Noah Bennett, the man who'd built a multi-billion-dollar empire through sheer determination and refusal to accept defeat, had just been handed a roadmap straight to the daughter he never knew existed. And Vienna knew, with absolute certainty, that he was coming. The studio door burst open fully, and children began streaming out in their pink tights and leotards, parents rising from chairs to collect their little dancers. Vienna stood on unsteady legs, plastering a smile on her face that felt like it might crack and shatter at any moment. She had to hold it together. For Malia. For just a little while longer, until she could figure out what to do, how to handle the storm that was coming. But as the other parents chatted cheerfully about carpool schedules and upcoming recital rehearsals, Vienna felt like she was drowning in a sea of normalcy that no longer belonged to her. Every sound seemed muffled. Every movement happened in slow motion, her body operating on autopilot while her mind spiraled through increasingly desperate scenarios. She could call a lawyer, but what would she even say? Help me hide my daughter from her billionaire father who just discovered she exists? That wouldn't hold up in any court. And Vienna knew it. She'd kept Malia's secret, made a unilateral decision that Noah had no right to know about his own child. How would that look to a judge? She could try to contact Noah first, try to control the narrative, explain her reasons before he showed up angry and demanding answers. But the thought of hearing his voice, of trying to justify 6 years of silence, made Vienna's stomach turn. What could she possibly say that would make this okay? The truth was, there was no way to make this okay. She'd made her choice 6 years ago, and now she had to face the consequences. "Mama!" Vienna's head snapped toward the sound of her daughter's voice. Malia came bounding through the door, her face lit up with the pure, uncomplicated joy of childhood. Her dance bag bounced against her hip. Her curls had escaped from the careful bun Vienna had created that morning, and those eyes, those unmistakable hazel eyes that would betray their secret to anyone who'd ever looked closely at Noah Bennett, sparkled with excitement. "Mama, I did it. I finally held my arabesque for the full 8 counts without wobbling." Malia crashed into Vienna with the full force of 5-year-old enthusiasm, throwing her arms around Vienna's waist. Vienna caught her daughter, holding her tighter than usual, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo and the slight sweat from an hour of hard work. This was what she'd been protecting, this pure, beautiful, innocent child who knew nothing of billionaire dynasties and family dysfunction and mothers who fled across the country to escape impossible situations. "That's wonderful, baby," Vienna managed, her voice only slightly strained. "I'm so proud of you." Miss Rebecca said I'm really improving, and she thinks I might be ready to try a double pirouette next week. Malia pulled back, looking up at Vienna with an expression of such complete trust and happiness that Vienna felt something crack inside her chest. "Can we get ice cream to celebrate, please? Just a small one?" Vienna looked down at her daughter's hopeful face and felt the weight of every decision she'd made 6 years ago pressing down on her shoulders. This child had no idea that her world was about to change, that the father she'd sometimes asked about in vague, curious ways, the daddy that other kids at school had but Malia didn't, was about to become a very real presence in their lives. "Sure, sweetheart," Vienna said, taking Malia's hand and guiding her toward the exit. "We can stop for ice cream on the way home." As they walked through the rain-slicked parking lot toward Vienna's aging Honda, Malia chatted happily about her dance class, about the girl who'd fallen during practice, about the costume Miss Rebecca was planning for the December recital. Normal 5-year-old conversation, filled with enthusiasm and innocent observations about her small world. Vienna unlocked the car and helped Malia into her booster seat, going through the familiar motions while her mind continued to race. She buckled the straps, checked them twice as she always did, then stood in the rain for a moment with her hand on the car door, letting the cold water run down her face and mix with tears she refused to acknowledge. This was it. The end of the peaceful life she'd built. The end of being Vienna Drake, single mother and pediatric clinic worker, woman with no complicated history or dangerous secrets. Noah would find them, probably within days, maybe hours if he was as thorough as she remembered, and then everything would change. The only question was whether she would wait for him to come to her or whether she would find the courage to face him first. Vienna got into the driver's seat and started the engine, glancing in the rearview mirror at Malia, who was already engrossed in making up a song about ballerinas and ice cream. So innocent, so completely unaware of the storm approaching. "I love you, baby girl," Vienna said softly. "I love you too, Mama," Malia replied without looking up from the imaginary choreography she was creating with her hands. "More than all the stars, more than all the stars," Vienna echoed, and pulled out of the parking lot into the rainy Portland evening, driving toward an uncertain future she could no longer avoid. Vienna hadn't always been a woman running from her past. 7 years ago, she'd been ambitious, driven, and standing in the most important presentation of her career. The conference room at Bennett Enterprises occupied the 42nd floor of their Manhattan headquarters, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city that made Vienna's small-town Oregon upbringing feel like a different lifetime. She'd been 26 years old, a junior architect at Morrison and Associates, and terrified in a way that had nothing to do with heights. "Ms. Drake," the senior partner had said. "You're up." Vienna had stood, smoothing her department store blazer, and approached the head of the table where Noah Bennett sat reviewing her proposal. She'd seen his photo in business magazines, of course. Everyone in architecture knew who Noah Bennett was. 32 years old, brilliant, ruthless, the man who'd transformed his family's struggling real estate company into a multi-billion-dollar empire with projects spanning 3 continents. But photos hadn't prepared her for the reality of him, the sharp intelligence in those storm-grey eyes, the way he listened with complete focus, like every word mattered, the intensity that seemed to fill the entire room. "Mr. Bennett," Vienna had begun, her voice steadier than she felt. "Thank you for considering our proposal for the Waterside District redevelopment." She'd launched into her presentation, explaining her vision for transforming the forgotten industrial buildings of Lower Manhattan into something that served the community rather than just showcasing wealth. Affordable housing integrated with green corridors, public spaces designed for families who'd been priced out of the neighborhood, preservation of the district's industrial character while making it accessible and alive. Her hands had moved across the architectural renderings, passionate and precise, as she detailed how they could honor the past while building something sustainable for the future. She'd been so focused on making her case that she hadn't noticed Noah leaning forward in his chair, his attention locked entirely on her. When she paused to take a breath, she found him staring at her with an expression that made her forget her next sentence completely. "Continue," Noah had said, and the corner of his mouth quivered slightly. "I want to hear everything you're thinking. That meeting lasted 2 hours instead of the scheduled 45 minutes. Noah had asked questions that proved he'd actually read her proposal, challenged assumptions that made her defend her vision even more passionately, and by the end, Vienna had felt something shift in the room, something that had nothing to do with architecture. The project was approved on the spot, but it was what Noah said as everyone filed out that changed Vienna's trajectory completely. "I want weekly progress meetings," he'd told her senior partner, his eyes still on Vienna. "With Miss Drake." Specifically, the weekly meetings became the highlight of Vienna's life, though she tried desperately not to let it show. Noah insisted on being involved in every detail of the Waterside project, which was unusual for a CEO of his stature. He showed up to construction site visits. He reviewed blueprints personally. He challenged Vienna's design choices not to undermine her, but to push her thinking further, to make the project better than either of them had initially conceived. "You're not thinking big enough," Noah had said during their 3rd meeting, spreading revised plans across his office desk. It was 9 o'clock on a Thursday night, and they were surrounded by empty takeout containers. "This courtyard space, what if we doubled it? Created an actual community gathering area instead of just a token green space?" Vienna had studied the plans, her mind racing through structural implications and budget considerations. That would require relocating these support columns. It's expensive. So we found the money. "This project isn't about cutting corners to maximize profit, Vienna. You taught me that—" Noah had looked at her then, really looked at her, and Vienna had felt her breath catch. "You said architecture should serve communities. So let's actually do that. Let's build something that matters." Those late nights became a pattern. Vienna would arrive at Noah's office after regular business hours, and they'd work through design challenges over dinner that neither of them cooked. They discovered they both preferred lo mein over fried rice, that they could debate the merits of different architectural styles for hours without getting bored, that Noah could make Vienna laugh even when she was stressed about deadlines and budget overruns. "Tell me something," Noah had asked one night, 3 months into the project. "Why architecture? What made you choose this?" Vienna had set down her chopsticks considering the question. "My hometown in Oregon had this old community center that was falling apart. When I was 12, they demolished it instead of renovating it. The neighborhood lost its gathering place and people just drifted apart. I remember thinking that buildings aren't just structures, they're anchors. They hold communities together. I wanted to learn how to build anchors that last." Noah had been quiet for a long moment. "That's the most honest answer I've heard in years. Everyone I work with talks about profit margins and return on investment. You talk about anchoring communities. Does that make me naive?" "It makes you remarkable," Noah had said, and the way he looked at her made Vienna's heart hammer against her ribs. The first kiss happened on the Waterside construction site itself, 4 months into the project. Vienna had been walking through the skeletal frames of buildings being reborn, checking that the afternoon's concrete pour had set properly. It was late, past 10, and she thought she was alone until she heard footsteps behind her. "You should wear a hard hat," Noah had said, appearing beside her with 2 helmets. "Safety regulations," says the CEO walking around his own construction site after hours without proper equipment. Vienna had shot back, but she'd taken the helmet. They'd walked through the space together, Vienna pointing out how the plans were translating into reality, the courtyard taking shape, the residential units maintaining the industrial aesthetic while being modernized for actual livability. Noah had listened with that focused attention he always gave her, asking questions that showed he genuinely cared about the vision they were building together. "This is going to be beautiful," Noah had said, standing in what would eventually become the Central Plaza. "You're going to change this neighborhood." "We're going to change it," Vienna had corrected. "This wouldn't exist without you backing it. I backed it because of you. Because you made me believe buildings could be more than just investments." Noah had reached out, brushing cement dust from her cheek, and Vienna had stopped breathing entirely. "Vienna, don't," she'd whispered, but she hadn't moved away. "Don't what?" "Don't do whatever you're about to do if you don't mean it." Noah's thumb had traced her jawline, his storm-grey eyes searching hers. "I don't do this. I don't mix business with—" "Neither do I," Vienna had interrupted, her heart racing, but then his lips were on hers, and the whole city seemed to disappear. The kiss was gentle at first, almost tentative, like they were both testing whether this was real or just the result of too many late nights and too much shared passion for the work. But then Vienna's hands found his collar, pulling him closer, and Noah's arms wrapped around her waist, and gently became desperate. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Noah had pressed his forehead against hers. "We probably shouldn't have done that," he'd murmured. "Probably not," Vienna had agreed. "I'm going to do it again anyway." "Good," Vienna had said, and she'd kissed him first this time. For 18 months, Vienna lived in a kind of happiness she hadn't known was possible. The invitation to the Bennett family's annual summer gathering arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier to Vienna's apartment like it was some kind of state document. Vienna had stared at the heavy cream cardstock with its embossed gold lettering, feeling both excited and terrified. In the 18 months she and Noah had been together, she'd never met his family. He'd mentioned them occasionally, usually in the context of business obligations or family expectations, but he'd kept that part of his life carefully separate from what they'd built together. "My mother wants to meet you," Noah had said that evening, finding Vienna on her apartment balcony with the invitation still in her hand. He'd wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I know it's intimidating, but it's important to me that you come." "Important how?" Vienna had asked. "Important because you're important, because what we have is real, and I want my family to see that—" Noah had turned her to face him, his storm-grey eyes serious. "I'm not going to pretend they're easy people, Vienna. My mother has very specific ideas about how things should be, but I need you to trust that what we have is stronger than their opinions." Vienna had wanted to believe him. She'd kissed him and said yes, she'd go, she'd meet the formidable Patricia Bennett and whatever came with that experience. She'd bought a new dress for the occasion, nothing too expensive because Vienna's architect salary didn't stretch to designer labels, but something elegant and professional that she hoped would make the right impression. Navy blue, modest neckline, the kind of dress that said she respected the formality of the event without trying too hard. The drive to the Hamptons had taken 2 hours. Noah had held her hand the entire way, occasionally squeezing it reassuringly, but Vienna noticed the tension in his shoulders increasing with every mile. By the time they pulled up to the Bennett family compound, a sprawling estate that made Vienna's childhood home look like a garden shed, her stomach was in knots. "Remember," Noah had said, helping her out of the car, "you're brilliant, you're accomplished, and you have nothing to prove to anyone, just be yourself." But Vienna was about to learn that being herself was exactly the problem. Patricia Bennett was a woman who could freeze a room with a single glance. She stood in the foyer of the main house, perfectly coiffed in white linen that probably cost more than Vienna's monthly rent, greeting guests with a kind of practiced warmth that never quite reached her eyes. When Noah introduced Vienna, Patricia's gaze swept over her in one comprehensive assessment that felt like being catalogued and filed under insufficient. "Vienna," Patricia said, extending a hand that felt cold even in the summer heat. "How lovely to finally meet you. Noah has mentioned you're involved in some sort of building project." "I'm an architect," Vienna had replied, trying to match Patricia's polished tone. "I've been working on the Waterside District redevelopment with Noah's company." "How quaint." Patricia's smile didn't waver, but something sharp glinted in her eyes. "Architecture. Such a demanding field, I'm sure." The word quaint landed like a slap, but Vienna forced herself to smile. Dinner was worse. Vienna found herself seated between Noah's aunt, a woman who spent the entire meal discussing yacht maintenance, and a family friend who seemed confused about why Vienna was there at all. Across the table, Patricia held court, discussing charitable foundations and society events with the ease of someone who'd been born into this world. "Noah, darling," Patricia said during the main course, her voice carrying easily across the table. "I spoke with Margaret Sterling last week. Her daughter Veronica just returned from Milan. She's doing fascinating work in sustainable design. Now there's a family with proper connections in the industry." Vienna's fork paused halfway to her mouth. The message was clear and brutal. Veronica Sterling, with her pedigree and connections, was an appropriate match. Vienna, with her state school education and modest background, was not. Noah's jaw tightened. "Mother, I'm simply saying that Bennett Enterprises requires certain considerations when choosing partnerships," Patricia continued smoothly, cutting into her salmon with surgical precision, professional and otherwise. "Legacy matters, Noah. You know this." Vienna felt the eyes of everyone at the table on her. Some sympathetic, some curious, some openly assessing whether she'd break under the pressure. She set down her fork carefully, her appetite completely gone. Noah reached for her hand under the table, squeezing it hard, but he didn't contradict his mother. He didn't defend Vienna or their relationship. He just sat there, torn between two worlds, and Vienna felt the first hairline crack form in the foundation of everything they'd built. The terrace confrontation happened after dinner, when guests had scattered across the estate's grounds with after-dinner drinks. Vienna had escaped outside, needing air and space away from Patricia's calculated coldness. She stood at the railing overlooking the ocean, watching waves crash against the private beach, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake coming here. Beautiful view, isn't it? Vienna turned to find Trevor Bennett approaching with a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. Noah's younger brother was 30, handsome in a way that was almost too perfect, with the same sharp features as Noah, but none of the depth in his eyes. "It is," Vienna agreed cautiously. Trevor leaned against the railing beside her, close enough that Vienna could smell the expensive whiskey on his breath. "So you're the reason my brother's been acting like a bleeding heart lately, the architect with the community project obsession. I wouldn't say obsession. You think you're different?" Trevor erupted, his tone casual but cutting. "You think Noah actually cares about your little community projects and your working-class authenticity?" Vienna's spine stiffened. "I think that's between Noah and me," Trevor laughed, cruel and knowing. "Here's what you need to understand, sweetheart. Noah does this, he always has. He finds some project, some cause, some bright-eyed idealist to play with until the novelty wears off. Then he goes back to reality, to people who belong in his world." "You don't know what you're talking about," Vienna said, but her voice wavered. "Don't I? Ask yourself why he's never mentioned you in interviews. Why are you not invited to the society events he attends? Why is my mother already planning his next appropriate relationship?" Trevor finished his whiskey, his smile sharp as broken glass. "You're a phase, Vienna, an experiment, and when Bennett Enterprises needs him to step up and be who he actually is, you'll be yesterday's news." He walked away, leaving Vienna alone on the terrace with seeds of doubt taking root in soil she hadn't known was fertile. 3 months after the Hamptons gathering, those seeds bloomed into poison that killed everything. Vienna had tried to dismiss Trevor's words as drunken cruelty. She'd tried to focus on the genuine connection she and Noah shared, the work they were doing together, the love she still believed was real. But she'd started noticing things. How Noah never mentioned her in the business interviews he gave about the Waterside project. How she was never invited to the charity galas and society events that filled his calendar. How his family treated her like a temporary inconvenience rather than someone permanent in Noah's life. The breaking point came during a crisis at Bennett Enterprises. A major investor, one of the oldest partners in the company, threatened to pull out of a crucial development deal, citing concerns about Noah's recent focus on what he called unprofitable social projects. The Waterside district, with its affordable housing component and community spaces, was specifically mentioned as evidence that Noah had lost sight of Bennett Enterprises' core mission of maximizing returns. Vienna had been in Noah's office when his mother called. It was late, past 10 on a Thursday night, one of their usual working sessions that had become less frequent as pressure mounted from every direction. Noah's phone had lit up with Patricia's name, and he'd answered on speaker without thinking. "Noah, this situation with Harrison is unacceptable." Patricia's voice had filled the office, sharp and commanding. "He's threatening to pull $12 million in capital funding because you've been prioritizing community outreach over profit margins. The Waterside project is profitable," Noah had argued, but Vienna heard the exhaustion in his voice. "The returns are just structured differently." "This is exactly what I warned you about," Patricia had cut him off. "That girl has you thinking like a non-profit when you should be thinking like a Bennett. You need to end this distraction and focus on what matters. Your family's legacy, not some architect's naive dreams about saving the world." Vienna had frozen in her chair, staring at Noah's face as his mother's words hung in the air between them. This was the moment. This was where he would defend her, defend them, defend everything they'd built together. But Noah had just looked exhausted, torn, silent. "I'll handle Harrison," he'd finally said, his voice flat. "See what you do. And Noah, it's time to make some difficult choices about your personal life. The board is watching. The family is watching. Act accordingly." The call had ended, and Vienna had sat in the silence that followed, feeling something fundamental break inside her chest. "Vienna," Noah had started. "Don't," she'd whispered. "Just don't." But the damage was done. Patricia had called her a distraction, had reduced their entire relationship to naive dreams that were compromising Noah's judgment. And Noah hadn't said a single word in their defense. Vienna finally understood what Trevor had meant on that terrace. She wasn't Noah's future. She was his phase. And when forced to choose between Vienna and his family's legacy, Noah would always choose the legacy. The 18 glorious months were over, crushed under the weight of expectations Vienna could never meet, and a family she would never be good enough for. The final conversation happened 3 days later, in Noah's office where they'd spent so many late nights building dreams together. Vienna had avoided Noah's calls during those 3 days, needing space to process what she'd heard, what she'd seen in his silence. But Noah had shown up at her apartment that morning, looking haggard and desperate, asking her to come to his office so they could talk properly. She'd agreed, hoping against hope that he would prove her wrong, that he would tell her Patricia was out of line, that their relationship mattered more than investor concerns and family approval. But the moment Vienna walked into that office and saw Noah's face, drawn and conflicted, she knew the conversation wouldn't go the way she'd hoped. "Vienna, we need to talk about what's happening," Noah had started, standing by the window instead of coming to her. That distance felt significant. The situation with Harrison, the pressure from the board, my mother's concerns. "Your mother's concerns," Vienna had repeated, her voice hollow. "You mean her concerns about me being a distraction from your precious legacy?" Noah had flinched. She shouldn't have said that. But she's not entirely wrong about the pressure I'm under. Bennett Enterprises is at a critical juncture, and I can't, there's too much at stake. "What are you saying?" Vienna had asked, even though part of her already knew. "I'm saying I need time to think, to figure out how to balance everything without—" Noah had stopped, running his hand through his hair in frustration. "Maybe everyone's right. Maybe I've been letting personal feelings compromise my judgment. Maybe we moved too fast, wanted too much too soon." Each word had felt like a blade sliding between Vienna's ribs, precise and devastating. "You're choosing them," Vienna had said quietly, her hands trembling at her sides. "The company, your family, your precious legacy, you're choosing all of that over us." "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is," Vienna's voice cracked, despite her efforts to stay composed. "It's exactly that simple. I'm standing here telling you that I love you, that what we've built together matters, and you're telling me you need time to think about whether I'm worth fighting for. Vienna, you don't understand the responsibilities I have." "You're right. I don't understand." Tears blurred Vienna's vision, but she refused to let them fall. "I don't understand how someone who claims to love me can stand there and reduce our entire relationship to a distraction. I don't understand how you can let your mother and your board decide who you love. And I don't want to—" "Wait." Noah had finally moved toward her, reaching out, but Vienna stepped back. "No, I've waited long enough. I waited for you to defend me at that dinner in the Hamptons. I waited for you to tell your mother she was wrong about me. I waited for you to choose us over their expectations." Vienna grabbed her bag, her chest tight with grief and rage. "I'm done waiting for you to be brave enough to fight for what we have. Or had. Vienna, please." But Vienna was already walking toward the door, and this time she didn't look back. She'd given Noah every chance to fight for her, to prove that their love was stronger than his family's manipulation, and he'd let her walk away without following. 3 weeks later, Vienna sat on the bathroom floor of her tiny apartment, staring at the positive pregnancy test in her shaking hands. No, this couldn't be happening. Not now, not after everything had fallen apart so completely. Her phone sat beside her on the tile, lit up with Noah's name for the dozenth time that day. He'd been calling constantly since their breakup, leaving voicemails that Vienna couldn't bear to listen to, sending texts that she deleted unread. Part of her wanted to know what he was saying, if he was apologizing, if he'd realized his mistake, if he was finally ready to choose her over his family. But the larger part of her knew it didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. Noah had shown her exactly where she ranked in his priorities, and Vienna wasn't interested in being someone's second choice or guilty conscience. Now, staring at those two pink lines, Vienna faced a choice that made everything else seem simple by comparison. She could tell Noah. He would step up. She knew him well enough to know that much. He would feel obligated to be involved, to provide for the child, maybe even to try to rebuild their relationship out of duty rather than love. And then what? Vienna would watch him resent the obligation, watch his family treat her child as an inconvenience, a mistake, a stain on the Bennett legacy. Watch Malia, because Vienna somehow already knew she was carrying a girl, grow up feeling like a burden rather than a blessing. Or Vienna could disappear. She could leave New York, start over somewhere Noah would never think to look, give her daughter a chance at a normal life, free from the complications of the Bennett family dynasty. Before you continue, I need to ask you something. What would you have done in Vienna's position? Would you have told Noah about the pregnancy despite everything? Or would you have chosen to protect your child from that complicated world? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know how you'd handle this impossible situation. Vienna made her choice sitting on that bathroom floor with morning sickness churning in her stomach and tears streaming down her face. She would disappear. She would give her daughter the peaceful, uncomplicated life that Vienna herself had grown up with, the kind of childhood where love mattered more than legacy, where worth wasn't measured in stock portfolios and society connections. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of careful planning. Vienna gave notice at Morrison and Associates, citing family reasons that nobody questioned. She broke her lease, sold most of her furniture, packed everything essential into her 12-year-old Honda. She withdrew her savings, modest but enough to survive on for a few months while she found new work. She deleted every social media account, changed her phone number. She'd been born Vienna Drake, her mother's surname, and had used it professionally before switching to her father's name Cortez in college. Now she reverted back to Drake, creating even more distance from the identity Noah was searching for. Portland, Oregon became her destination for no reason, except that it was across the country from New York, in a city large enough to disappear into, but small enough to feel manageable. A place where nobody would know her face or her history. Noah's calls continued until her old number was disconnected. Vienna wondered what his voicemails had said, if he'd been trying to apologize or simply seeking closure. But she couldn't let herself listen, couldn't risk weakening her resolve. She left New York on a Tuesday morning in November, driving away from everything she'd built, her career, her relationship, the life she'd thought was hers, with her hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. "It's going to be okay," Vienna had whispered to the child growing inside her. "I'm going to give you better than what I had, better than what he could offer. I promise." Malia Rose Drake was born on a rainy June evening in Portland, in a hospital where nobody asked uncomfortable questions about the absent father. Vienna had never experienced love like the moment they placed her daughter in her arms, fierce and protective and all-consuming. Malia had Noah's eyes, those distinctive storm-grey irises that would make denial impossible if they ever crossed paths. But everything else was Vienna. The dark curls, the shape of her face, the way she observed the world with serious intensity even as a newborn. "Hello, beautiful girl," Vienna had whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your mama, and I'm going to love you enough for 2 parents. I promise." She'd kept that promise for 6 years. Vienna found work at a pediatric clinic, taking on double shifts when necessary to make ends meet. She rented a small apartment in the Hawthorne district with hardwood floors and a window box where Malia grew herbs and flowers. She enrolled Malia in dance classes and swim lessons, filled their home with books and art supplies, created a life that was simple and safe. Some nights, usually when Malia did something that reminded Vienna painfully of Noah, that thoughtful tilt of her head, that determined set of her jaw, those impossibly expressive eyes, Vienna wondered if she'd made the right choice. She wondered if Noah ever thought about her, if he'd tried to find her after she disappeared, if he mourned what they'd lost. But mostly Vienna focused on being the best mother she could be to the extraordinary little girl who'd become her entire world. Malia was bright and curious and empathetic, asking questions about everything, creating elaborate stories with her toys, dancing through their apartment like gravity was optional. Vienna had built a good life, a peaceful life, a life where her daughter would never feel like a mistake or an obligation or a complication to someone's carefully planned legacy. Until that Tuesday evening in the dance studio waiting room, when Vienna's carefully constructed world tilted dangerously on its axis, and she realized that peace had always been temporary. The dance studio door burst open in a whirlwind of purple tulle and boundless energy. "Mama! Mama, I did it!" Malia came bounding out, her dark curls escaping from the bun that Miss Rebecca had carefully pinned before class. Her face was flushed pink from exertion, and those hazel eyes, Noah's eyes, impossible to deny, sparkled with the kind of pure joy that only 5-year-olds could radiate so completely. "I finally did a clean double pirouette without falling over." Vienna forced her face into a smile, pushing down the panic that had been clawing at her chest for the past hour. She crouched down to Malia's level, opening her arms as her daughter crashed into her with the full force of childhood enthusiasm. "That's wonderful, baby," Vienna said, pulling Malia into a tight hug that was as much for Vienna's comfort as her daughter's. "I'm so proud of you." "Miss Rebecca said I'm getting really good," Malia continued, pulling back just enough to look at Vienna's face with those intense, observant eyes. "And she said maybe I can be in the front row for the recital in December." "Can you believe it, Mama? The front row?" "I absolutely believe it," Vienna said, smoothing Malia's wild curls with trembling hands that she hoped her daughter wouldn't notice. "You work so hard in class. You deserve to be in the front row." Malia beamed, then launched into a detailed explanation of exactly how she'd managed the double pirouette, something about spotting the mirror and keeping her arms tight and remembering to push off properly. Vienna nodded and made appropriate sounds of interest, but her mind was still back in that waiting room, still seeing her daughter's face flash across the television screen with that devastating caption beneath it. "And then Sophia, you know, the girl with the really shiny shoes. She tried to do a triple but she fell, and Miss Rebecca said, 'We're not ready for triples yet. We need to master doubles first,' which I did, so maybe next month I can try triples. What do you think, Mama?" "I think you should listen to Miss Rebecca," Vienna managed, standing up and taking Malia's small hand in hers. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you home. I'll make your favorite pasta for dinner." Malia's face lit up even brighter. "With the special sauce?" "With the special sauce," Vienna confirmed, grateful for the familiar routine of this conversation, this ritual they'd performed dozens of times. They walked through the Portland drizzle toward the parking lot, Malia chattering about dance class politics, who got to demonstrate the new combination, which girl had complained about the music being too fast, what costume Miss Rebecca was thinking about for the December recital. Normal 5-year-old concerns, beautiful, innocent, blissfully unaware that the foundation of her world was about to shift. Vienna unlocked the car and helped Malia into her booster seat in the back, buckling the straps with practiced efficiency. But when Vienna leaned back, she found Malia staring at her with an intensity that was unsettling in someone so young. "Mama?" Malia's small hands reached up to frame Vienna's face, her expression suddenly serious. "Are you okay? You look sad." Vienna's heart clenched. Malia had always been perceptive empathetic, in ways that seemed beyond her years. She noticed when Vienna was tired from double shifts, brought her drawings to cheer her up, asked thoughtful questions about feelings and fairness that sometimes left Vienna speechless. "I'm fine, baby," Vienna lied, forcing brightness into her voice. "Just a long day at work. Lots of patients at the clinic." Malia studied her face for another moment, those hazel eyes searching. "Did someone make you sad? Because if they did, I can be extra good tonight and help you feel better." The offer was so pure, so genuinely meant, that Vienna felt tears prick at her eyes. She kissed Malia's forehead, breathing in the scent of her daughter's strawberry shampoo and the faint smell of dance studio rosin. "You make me feel better just by being you," Vienna whispered. "I love you so much, Malia Rose. I love you too, Mama." Malia wrapped her small arms around Vienna's neck in a tight squeeze. "More than all the stars." "More than all the stars." Vienna echoed their familiar phrase, then pulled back and closed the car door before Malia could see the tears threatening to fall. That same Tuesday evening, 3,000 miles away in Manhattan, Noah Bennett sat in his penthouse study surrounded by ghosts. The files covered his mahogany desk in layers, 6 years' worth of private investigator reports, each one documenting another dead end in his search for the woman who'd vanished from his life without explanation. Noah had read them so many times he could recite passages from memory, but he kept pulling them out anyway, as if repetition might reveal something he'd missed. Vienna Drake. Last known address in Manhattan, vacated in November 6 years ago. Employment at Morrison and Associates terminated with 2 weeks' notice, citing family reasons. No forwarding address, no social media presence after November 15th. Phone number disconnected, bank accounts closed. She disappeared as thoroughly as if she'd never existed. Noah picked up the earliest report, dated 3 weeks after Vienna had walked out of his office. 3 weeks of calling her unanswered phone, leaving voicemails that grew increasingly desperate, showing up at her apartment to find new tenants who knew nothing about the previous resident. He'd hired the investigator in a panic, convinced something terrible had happened, but the reports had revealed only deliberate disappearance, someone who'd carefully erased their tracks and didn't want to be found. Noah had never understood why. Yes, their breakup had been painful. Yes, he'd been a coward in that final conversation, too torn between competing pressures to fight for what they had. But he'd been calling her to fix things, to tell her he'd made a mistake, to say he was willing to face down his mother and his entire board if it meant keeping Vienna in his life. Instead, he'd gotten silence. Complete, devastating silence. The Find Your Family initiative had started as something else entirely, a way to channel Noah's grief and guilt into something productive. 2 years after Vienna's disappearance, Noah had attended a charity event focused on foster care reform. He'd listened to stories about children separated from biological families by circumstance, about parents searching for kids they'd lost touch with, about the holes that missing family members left in people's lives. And Noah had thought about Vienna, about the hole she'd left in his life, about families torn apart by pride and fear and failures of courage. What if we could help people find each other? Noah had asked his chief operating officer the next morning. What if Bennett Enterprises partnered with adoption agencies, foster care systems, DNA registries, built a comprehensive database to help reunite families? His board had questioned it, of course. Patricia had called it a waste of company resources, another example of Noah letting sentiment compromise business judgment. But Noah had pushed it through anyway, using his controlling stake in the company to override objections. He told himself it was purely altruistic, helping other people find what he'd lost, pouring resources into reuniting families instead of just building towers. But part of him, the part he barely admitted to himself, had hoped the initiative might somehow lead to Vienna. Maybe she'd see the campaign. Maybe she'd reach out. Maybe, after all this time, she'd explain why she'd cut him out so completely. It had taken 4 years to build the infrastructure, partnering with agencies across the country, creating secure databases, establishing protocols for verification and reunification. The launch had been scheduled for months, with press conferences and media coverage designed to reach as many people as possible. Noah had reviewed every element personally, including the final database of children seeking biological relatives. Hundreds of faces, each representing a family searching for connection. And then he'd seen her. Noah had been in his study when the final database review appeared on his laptop screen. It was late, past 11, and he'd been working through the last details before the next day's official launch. The faces had scrolled past in a steady stream. Toddlers, teenagers, young adults, each with their story of separation and hope. Noah had reviewed them clinically, professionally, until one face made him stop breathing entirely. The girl couldn't have been more than 5 years old. She had dark curls that cascaded around her face in a way that reminded Noah painfully of Vienna. But it was the eyes that stopped his heart, storm grey, intense, observant. His eyes. Looking back at him from a stranger's face. Noah's hand had frozen on the mouse, his chest had tightened with a feeling he couldn't name, recognition, shock, impossible hope. The file information loaded beside the photo. Name, Malia Drake, age, 5 years old, location, Portland, Oregon, mother, Vienna Drake, father, unknown status, seeking biological father. Noah had stared at that screen for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. His mind raced through calculations that made his hands shake. Malia was 5 years old. Vienna had disappeared 6 years ago. If she'd been pregnant when she left, if this child was his daughter, why hadn't Vienna told him? The eyes were unmistakable. Noah had seen his own face in mirrors for 38 years. He knew those eyes, that particular shade of grey, the intensity of expression even in a child's face. Vienna Drake. She'd been using her mother's maiden name all along, creating distance from the Cortez surname he'd been searching for. That's why the investigators had never found her. They'd been looking for the wrong name. Noah had immediately called his head of security. "I need everything you can find on Vienna Drake in Portland, Oregon, mother of a 5-year-old girl named Malia. I need it tonight. Now, here's where I need to pause and ask you something important. If you were Noah, and you just discovered you had a 5-year-old daughter you never knew existed, a daughter your ex-partner hid from you for years, would you feel like you deserved to know the truth? Or would you think Vienna had valid reasons for keeping this secret? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments, because this question is at the heart of everything that happens next." The preliminary report had arrived within 2 hours, confirming everything Noah's heart already knew. Vienna Drake, formerly Vienna Cortez, age 33, employed at Riverside Pediatric Clinic in Portland. Residence, modest apartment in the Hawthorne district. No marriage record, no other children, single mother raising Malia alone. The investigators' notes included school records, medical files obtained through sources Noah didn't question. Malia's birth date, June 18th, 6 years ago, exactly 9 months after Vienna had disappeared from New York. Noah had sat at his desk, staring at Malia's photo beside Vienna's driver's license picture that the investigator had pulled from DMV records. His daughter. Their daughter. The family he'd lost without ever knowing it existed. The rage had come first, white-hot and righteous. Vienna had been pregnant when she left. She'd known she was carrying his child, and had chosen to disappear rather than tell him. She'd made the decision to raise their daughter alone, to keep Malia from him, to deprive him of 6 years of his daughter's life. 6 years of first words and first steps. 6 years of birthdays and bedtime stories. 6 years of being a father that Vienna had stolen from him. But beneath the rage was something more complicated. Grief for what he'd lost, guilt for the role he'd played in Vienna's decision to run, and a desperate, aching need to meet the daughter whose face looked so much like his own. Noah stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the glittering Manhattan skyline. The same view he'd once shared with Vienna while discussing dreams and blueprints and futures they'd both believed in. Somewhere across the country, the woman he'd never stopped loving was raising a child who had his eyes. His daughter. Their daughter. A soft knock interrupted Noah's thoughts. His executive assistant stood in the doorway looking concerned. "Mr. Bennett, your jet is ready at Teterboro. We can leave for Portland. Within the hour." Noah had made the call an hour ago, as soon as the investigator's report confirmed what he already knew. There was no question of whether to go, only how quickly he could get there. "Tell the pilot we're wheels up in 30 minutes, Noah said, his voice carrying the determination that had built an empire and would now reclaim his family. "And contact the Peninsula Hotel in Portland. Book the suite indefinitely. I don't know how long I'll be staying, but I'm not leaving until I get answers." 2 days after Vienna saw Malia's face on that television screen, someone knocked on her apartment door at 7:30 on a Thursday evening. Vienna had been cleaning up after dinner, while Malia sat at their small kitchen table working on a drawing of ballerinas. The knock was firm, deliberate, the kind of knock that said the person on the other side wasn't going away. Vienna's hands froze in the soapy dishwater. Her heart began hammering against her ribs in a rhythm that felt like panic and inevitability colliding. She knew. Somehow, she knew exactly who was standing on the other side of that door. "Mama, someone's knocking," Malia said helpfully, not looking up from her drawing. "I know, baby. Keep coloring. I'll get it." Vienna dried her hands on a towel, her legs feeling unsteady as she crossed the small living room. She paused at the door, her hand on the knob, taking one breath to prepare herself for what came next. Then she opened it. Noah Bennett stood in the hallway of her modest apartment building, looking completely out of place in his tailored suit and expensive shoes. He'd aged in the 6 years since she'd last seen him, more grey at the temples, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, a weariness in his posture that spoke of battles fought and burdens carried. But those storm-grey eyes were exactly as she remembered, intense, intelligent, and currently burning with emotions Vienna couldn't quite read. For a moment, neither of them spoke. 6 years of silence stretched between them like a chasm that words couldn't bridge. "Hello, Vienna," Noah finally said, his voice carefully controlled. "Or should I say Vienna Drake?" Vienna's throat tightened. "You shouldn't be here, shouldn't I?" Noah's jaw clenched, and Vienna saw the controlled fury beneath his polite facade. "I have a daughter, a 5-year-old daughter I knew nothing about. You don't get to tell me where I should or shouldn't be." "How did you find us?" Vienna asked, even though the answer was obvious. "Your daughter's face was in my database." Noah's voice was steady, but Vienna could hear the anger underneath. "The Find Your Family initiative that you apparently watched on television. Malia Drake, age 5, seeking biological father. Want to explain how that happened?" Vienna stepped into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind her so Malia wouldn't hear. "Keep your voice down. She doesn't know she has a father?" Noah interrupted, his control finally cracking. "I wonder why that is, Vienna. Maybe because her mother decided to erase him from existence." "You have no right." "I have every right." Noah's voice rose, then dropped again as he visibly fought for composure. 6 years, Vienna. 6 years I've been looking for you. 6 years of private investigators and dead ends and wondering what the hell happened. And all that time, you were here, raising our daughter, and you never said a word. You want to know what happened." Vienna's own anger flared, hot and defensive. "You happened, Noah. You and your mother and your board and your precious family legacy that mattered more than us. That's not fair, isn't it?" Vienna crossed her arms, fighting tears she refused to let fall. "You chose them. When it came down to choosing between me and everything they wanted for you, you chose them. You told me you needed time to think, like our entire relationship was something you had to weigh against profit margins. I was calling you to fix things." Noah's frustration was clear now. "For 3 weeks, I called you constantly. I was ready to tell you I'd made a mistake, that I was willing to face my mother and the board and anyone else who had a problem with us. But you were gone. You disappeared completely, and I had no idea why." "You were 3 weeks too late," Vienna said quietly, and something in her tone made Noah stop mid-breath. "What does that mean?" Vienna looked away, unable to meet his eyes. "I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks after I walked out of your office. 3 weeks after you let me leave without fighting for us." She watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. Noah's face went pale, his hand reaching out to brace against the hallway wall. "You were pregnant," he said, his voice hollow. "When you left New York, you were pregnant with Malia." "Yes. And you didn't tell me?" "No." Vienna forced herself to look at him, to face the hurt and anger in his eyes. "I didn't tell you because I wasn't going to trap you with obligation. I wasn't going to watch you resent being forced into fatherhood because your ex-girlfriend got pregnant. And I wasn't going to expose my daughter to your family's poison." "My family's—" Noah stopped processing. "You thought I would see our child as an obligation? As a trap? What else was I supposed to think?" Vienna's voice broke despite her efforts to stay strong. "You couldn't even defend me at a dinner party, Noah. You couldn't tell your mother she was wrong about me. You chose to let me walk away rather than fight for what we had. So yes, I thought you'd feel trapped. I thought you'd do the right thing out of duty, and I'd spend the rest of my life watching you wish you'd never met me." Noah was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he struggled with something. When he spoke again, his voice was raw. "You're right. About 6 years ago anyway. I was a coward. I let my mother's expectations and board pressure paralyze me when I should have been fighting for us. I failed you, Vienna. I know that." He looked directly at her, and Vienna saw genuine pain in his eyes. "But you made that choice for both of us. You decided I wasn't worth a chance to be a father. You decided our daughter was better off never knowing me. That's not protection, Vienna. That's punishment." The accusation hit harder than Vienna expected. "I was protecting her. From what?" "From having a father who would have loved her." Noah's voice rose again. "From having resources and security and a family beyond just you. You decided, all on your own, that I didn't deserve to know my daughter existed, that she didn't deserve to know her father, and for 6 years you've kept that from both of us. Your family would have destroyed her," Vienna said, but her voice lacked conviction now. "Patricia would have looked at Malia the same way she looked at me, like a mistake, like something that didn't belong in the Bennett world." "My mother doesn't get a vote anymore," Noah said firmly. "I've spent 6 years learning what matters and what doesn't, building the Find Your Family initiative, watching other people reunite with lost family members. It changed me, Vienna. I'm not the same man who let you walk away." Vienna wanted to believe him. Part of her desperately wanted to believe that Noah had changed, that he'd learned to fight for what mattered. But 6 years of protecting Malia, of building walls around their small, peaceful life, couldn't be dismantled in one hallway conversation. "I don't know how to do this," Vienna admitted quietly. I don't know how to let you into her life after all this time. Then we figure it out together, Noah said. The apartment door opened wider, and Malia's voice cut through the tension. Mama, who are you talking to? Vienna's breath caught. She turned to find Malia standing in the doorway, her drawing still in one hand, those hazel eyes, Noah's eyes, looking curiously between Vienna and the stranger in their hallway. Time seemed to stop as Noah saw his daughter in person for the first time. Malia stood there in her purple pajamas with dancing bears on them, her dark curls pulled into a messy ponytail, a small frown of concentration on her face as she studied Noah with the intensity of a child trying to solve a puzzle. Hello, Malia said with the straightforward politeness Vienna had taught her. I'm Malia. Who are you? Noah's expression transformed into something Vienna had never seen before, wonder mixed with grief, mixed with a love so fierce it was almost painful to witness. He crouched down to Malia's eye level, his hands trembling slightly. Hello, Malia. My name is Noah. His voice was gentle, careful, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing and breaking this fragile moment. It's very nice to meet you. Malia tilted her head, studying him with those observant eyes. You have the same color eyes as me. That's neat. Most people don't. Vienna watched Noah struggle to respond, emotion clearly overwhelming him. Yeah, he managed. We do have the same eyes. That is neat. Are you a friend of my mama's? The question hung in the air, loaded with 6 years of complications that a 5-year-old couldn't possibly understand. I used to be, Noah said, glancing at Vienna with an expression that asked for help, for guidance on how to navigate this moment. Vienna stepped forward, her protective instincts warring with the recognition that this moment was inevitable and perhaps even necessary. Malia, sweetheart, why don't you finish your drawing? Mr. Bennett and I need to talk for a few more minutes. Can I show him my drawing first? It's really good. Miss Rebecca says I'm getting better at proportions. Noah looked like he might cry. I would love to see your drawing. Malia beamed and disappeared back into the apartment to retrieve it. The moment she was out of earshot, Vienna turned to Noah. You can't just, she started. I know, Noah interrupted gently. I know this needs to be handled carefully. I'm not going to tell her tonight. But Vienna, we need to talk, really talk, about how to do this, about what Malia needs, about what happens next. Vienna closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 6 years of secrets finally crushing down on her. This is going to change everything. It already has, Noah said. The moment I saw her face on that screen, everything changed. We can't go back. We can only go forward. Malia returned with her drawing, proudly showing Noah her ballerinas. And as Vienna watched Noah admire her daughter's artwork with genuine interest and wonder, she realized he was right. Everything had already changed. The only question now was whether they could build something new from the broken pieces of what they'd lost. Noah Bennett didn't leave Portland. Days turned into a week, then 2 weeks, and the CEO, who'd once treated every minute as a calculated investment, remained at the Peninsula Hotel, conducting board meetings via video conference and rearranging his entire life around a 5-year-old girl he was just beginning to know. Vienna had expected him to demand immediate access, to use lawyers and money to force his way into Malia's life. Instead, Noah had asked what Vienna needed, what would make this transition easiest for their daughter. They met for coffee 3 times that first week, neutral territory at a cafe near Vienna's apartment, talking through logistics like they were negotiating a business deal, because that felt safer than acknowledging the emotional minefield they were navigating. We need to tell her the truth, Noah had said during their second meeting, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup he wasn't drinking. She deserves to know I'm her father, but I want to do it right. I want your input on timing, on how to explain it in a way that doesn't scare her or make her feel like her world is being turned upside down. Vienna had studied him across the table, looking for signs of the man who'd let family pressure destroy their relationship. But this Noah was different, more certain, more grounded, willing to wait and listen rather than demanding immediate resolution. She's going to have questions, Vienna had said carefully, about where you've been, why you weren't there before. I don't want her to think she wasn't wanted. She was wanted, Noah had said fiercely. I just didn't know she existed. And that's on both of us to explain, honestly, but in a way she can understand. They'd crafted the conversation together, rehearsing different approaches, agreeing on what to say and what to save for when Malia was older. And through it all, Vienna had watched Noah transform from the angry man in her hallway into someone who put Malia's emotional well-being above his own need for answers. Noah's first official outing with Malia happened on a Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks after he'd arrived in Portland. Vienna had been terrified, her protective instincts screaming at her not to let Malia out of her sight. But she'd watched Noah crouch down to Malia's eye level in their apartment, asking if she'd like to get ice cream and maybe walk around the park, and something in his gentle patience had convinced Vienna to trust him. "We'll be back in 2 hours, Noah had promised. "And Vienna, you can call me every 15 minutes if you need to. I won't mind." Vienna had called 3 times in the first hour, unable to help herself. Each time, Noah had patiently put Malia on the phone so Vienna could hear her daughter's happy chatter about the ice cream flavors she'd tried and the ducks they'd seen at the park. When they returned, Malia had been talking a mile a minute about everything Noah had told her, about buildings and cities and how architects design spaces for people to live in. "Noah knows about buildings too, Mama," Malia had announced, her face flushed with excitement. "He said you're the best architect he's ever worked with. Is that true? Did you work together?" Vienna had met Noah's eyes over Malia's head, seeing the emotion there. The wonder of discovering his daughter was curious and brilliant and funny, the grief of everything he'd missed, the determination not to miss anything else. Over the following weeks, Noah had shown up consistently. He'd attended Malia's dance class, sitting in the waiting room where Vienna had first seen his face on television, watching through the studio window as Malia practiced her pirouettes. He'd helped with homework, reading alongside Malia and asking thoughtful questions that made her think deeper about the stories. He'd learned that she loved strawberry pancakes and hated broccoli, that she wanted to be either a dancer or a veterinarian when she grew up, that she collected smooth rocks from the park and named each one. Vienna had watched it all from a distance at first, her defenses still up, waiting for Noah to get bored or impatient, or to reveal that this was all performance rather than genuine connection. But he never did. Noah showed up every single day, patient and present and clearly falling in love with the daughter he'd never known he had. 3 weeks after Noah's arrival, Malia asked the question they'd been preparing for. They were at the park, all 3 of them this time, and Malia had been playing on the swings while Vienna and Noah sat on a nearby bench. She'd run over for water, her face sweaty and happy, when she'd suddenly gone very still and looked at Noah with those observant hazel eyes. "Noah?" Malia's voice was serious, thoughtful. "Are you my daddy?" The question landed with the force of a bomb in the quiet afternoon. Vienna's breath caught. Noah's entire body tensed beside her, but when he spoke, his voice was steady and honest and full of love. "Yes," Noah said simply, crouching down so he was eye level with Malia. "I am your daddy. I wish I'd known about you from the very beginning, but I didn't, and I'm sorry for that. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Malia processed this with the seriousness of someone much older. "Why didn't you know about me?" Vienna started to intervene, but Noah gently shook his head, keeping his attention on Malia. "Your mama and I had some grown-up problems a long time ago, before you were born," Noah explained carefully. "We both made mistakes, and we stopped talking to each other. Your mama didn't tell me about you because she thought it was the right thing to do at the time. And I wasn't looking in the right places to find you both. But you found us now," Malia said, and it wasn't quite a question. "I did. And I'm so happy I found you." Noah's voice cracked slightly. "You're the most amazing person, Malia. You're smart and kind and talented, and I'm proud to be your daddy." Malia had thought about this for a moment, then asked with heartbreaking directness, "Are you going to stay, or are you going to leave like Sarah's daddy did?" Vienna's heart broke. Sarah was a girl in Malia's dance class whose father had disappeared after her parents divorced. Malia had clearly been thinking about this, worrying about it. "I'm staying," Noah said firmly. "Maybe not in Portland all the time. I have work in New York that I need to do. But I'm going to be in your life, Malia. I'm going to come to your dance recitals and help with homework and take you for ice cream. I'm going to be your daddy for real, not just in name. I promise you that." Malia had studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, can I go back to the swings now?" "Of course you can." As Malia ran back to play, Vienna had felt tears streaming down her face. Noah had sat back down beside her, his own eyes wet. "She took that better than I expected," he'd said quietly. "She's resilient," Vienna had managed. "But Noah, you meant what you said, right? About staying? Because if you're going to disappear—" "I meant every word," Noah had interrupted gently. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm her father, and I'm going to show up for her, every single day that I possibly can." Vienna had seen the transformation in Noah over those weeks, but it was the phone call with his mother that proved how much he truly changed. It happened a month after Noah had arrived in Portland. He'd been having dinner at Vienna's apartment, something that had become routine, the three of them eating together like they were testing what family might feel like. After Malia had gone to bed, Noah's phone rang with Patricia Bennett's name on the screen. "I should take this," Noah had said, and Vienna had started to leave the room to give him privacy. "Stay," Noah had asked. "I want you to hear this." He'd answered the speaker. "Noah, this has gone on long enough." Patricia's voice had filled the small living room, sharp and commanding. "You've been in Portland for a month. The board is asking questions. You need to come home and address this situation properly. This situation is my daughter, Mother," Noah had said calmly. "Her name is Malia. She's 5 years old, she loves to dance, and she's brilliant. And yes, I'm going to address it properly by being her father. Don't be naive, Noah. You can provide for the child financially without disrupting your entire life. Set up a trust, arrange for appropriate support, and—" "No." Noah's voice had been firm, final. "I'm not doing this your way. Malia is my daughter. Vienna is Malia's mother. You can accept that and be part of your granddaughter's life, or you can stay in New York and miss everything. Your choice, Mother." The silence on the other end had been profound. Vienna had watched Noah's face, seeing the determination there, the man who'd finally learned to choose what mattered over what was expected. "You're serious," Patricia had finally said, and for the first time Vienna could remember, she'd sounded uncertain, completely serious. "I've spent 6 years building initiatives to reunite families. I'm not going to ignore my own daughter because it's inconvenient for Bennett Enterprises or your social calendar." Noah's voice had softened slightly. "I'd like you to meet Malia. I'd like her to know her grandmother, but that only happens if you can treat Vienna with respect and accept that they're both permanent parts of my life now." Another long silence. "Then I'll need to think about this." "You do that," Noah had said. "But while you're thinking, understand this. I'm not the same person I was 6 years ago. I learned what matters, and Malia matters more than anything else." He'd ended the call, and Vienna had stared at him in shock. "You just stood up to Patricia Bennett," she'd said, almost not believing it. "I should have done it 6 years ago," Noah had replied. "I should have fought for us then. I can't change the past, but I can make sure I don't make the same mistakes now. Before we continue, I need to pause and say something. If this story about second chances and family restoration has moved you, if you believe in the power of people growing and changing and fighting for what matters, please hit that like button and share this video. Your engagement helps us bring more stories like this to people who need to hear them. And drop a comment about your own experiences with second chances or family healing. This community is built on your voices, and we want to hear from you. The changes came gradually, but they were real. Noah established a trust for Malia's education and future, but more importantly, he established himself as a present father. He flew back to New York for critical board meetings, but he always returned within 48 hours, bringing Malia small gifts. Not expensive toys, but thoughtful things like books she'd mentioned wanting, or a smooth rock he'd found that would fit perfectly in her collection. He found an apartment in Portland, refusing to continue living in a hotel when he had a daughter nearby. He adjusted his schedule so he could attend Malia's dance classes and school events. He coordinated with Vienna on parenting decisions, learning to co-parent with someone he'd once loved, and was slowly learning to trust again. And Vienna, despite her fears and protective instincts, found herself watching Noah with new eyes. This wasn't the man who'd buckled under family pressure 6 years ago. This was someone who'd fought his own board to launch a social initiative, who'd learned to prioritize what mattered over what was profitable. This was a man who sat on the floor playing with toy horses, who braided Malia's hair with surprising competence after watching tutorials, who read bedtime stories with different voices for each character. This was the man Vienna had fallen in love with, but stronger, more certain, finally brave enough to fight for his family. The December recital arrived with the first real snowfall Portland had seen in years. Malia had been practicing for months, perfecting her routine, talking endlessly about the front row position she'd earned through hard work and determination. She'd been most excited about one thing: both her parents would be there watching. Vienna and Noah arrived together, sitting side by side in the crowded auditorium. When Malia came on stage in her costume, a purple tutu that matched her dance bag, her eyes immediately scanned the audience. The moment she spotted Vienna and Noah sitting together, her entire face lit up with a smile so bright it made Vienna's chest ache. That smile. That joy of seeing both parents present, supporting her, being a family even if it was a complicated one. Thank you for taking this emotional journey with us. Vienna, Noah, and Malia's story is about second chances, about people learning to fight for what matters, about families that can heal even after being broken. If this story moved you, if you believe in the power of redemption and the possibility of rebuilding trust, please subscribe to Mr. Steele Rich Stories. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the powerful narratives we bring to you every week. And I want to hear from you. Have you experienced a second chance in your own life? Have you seen people grow and change and become better versions of themselves? Drop your stories in the comments. This community is built on your voices, your experiences, your belief that people and relationships can heal. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to choose what matters, that families can find their way back together, that love, real love, is worth fighting for even when it's hard. We have more incredible stories coming your way, tales of courage, transformation, and the resilience of the human heart. What story should we tell next? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, remember, the families we build, the choices we make to show up for the people we love. That's what creates a legacy that actually matters. This is Mr. Steele Rich Stories, where every narrative reminds us that hope, healing, and second chances are always possible. Thank you for being part of this community. We'll see you in the next story.